I think the thing Pete was most shocked by, Jared, was that when we were filming the commercial, sometimes they'd have a clapper, and other times the guy just walk in front and go, because they're just marking it, Pete. But Pete thought that was so amateur.
I'm like, what the hell is this guy doing?
You're talking about the commercial, right?
Oh, yeah.
The commercial for the book. It's not an option.
Tell you what, a hell of a lot of people are there's a lot of people pretty damn excited about that, John. Honestly, it's great. I don't know that I would have expected so much activity early on, but anybody who knows me now is literally texting me or emailing me or whatever going, hey, I saw you had books out. I thought they weren't coming out for another couple of weeks. And I go, well, they put in a front thing, because we were doing this thing, the money show. By the way, those people were phenomenal, weren't they, John? I mean, they did a great job. It was a lot of fun. There was a lot of great speakers there. And you and I think, had a heck of a good time with all those people. It was great.
We got to heckle a lot of them too.
We did. That was fun.
The best part is, Jared, that a lot of the folks, of course, when they're coming up and we're handing out a signed copy of the book and so forth, they're basically, hey, can I get a picture? Of course. We ended up having to take a picture with almost 500 people, which was fine. We sort of anticipated it. And luckily, we pre-signed a lot of those books. 99% of them, we pre-signed them. So it went a lot faster. Poor Charles Payne was
Talk about a great, generous guy, though, John. I mean, because he wasn't in the same position as we were. So he did have to sign them, then take the picture and go through that. And, it's great because it's fatiguing. It sounds ridiculous to say that, but it's pretty damn fatiguing to do that for 500 books. That's quite a run.
Yeah. I mean, again, if, and I'm not saying it did, but if it took you a minute a book, Pete, to sign and take a picture with somebody and all that kind of stuff, 60 minutes, 60 into 500, that's a lot. I mean, you're talking hours, Jared.
Yeah.
It wouldn't just be a boring.
Yeah.
Yes.
There you go.
All right. Thank you for joining us on the Rebel's Edge, everybody. I'm John Najarian. He is Pete Najarian, and Jared is up there and both sides with all of the things that Jared's putting up here with dancing bulls and bears and all that stuff. Pete, let's dive into the macro minute, shall we?
Good. Yep.
I'm going to say it's Apple earnings on deck because for whatever reason, people are reading into it. Oh, the Fed's on hold, which they are. The Fed's on hold and rates are back down to 4.65% or something, Pete. I think now it's all on Apple as far as if they had a great report or a bad report, that could really impact the markets.
I'm just going to hit this one, John. How about the fact that now we've had 2 in a row where they've made a pause, and I'm talking about the Fed in terms of the rates and so forth. So they've paused. The Fed tool said it was 99% assured that was going to happen. They were right. They're already looking ahead towards December. It's about 85% that they pause again, John. So I think that buildup has people more and more excited, which is why, at least right this moment, I'm looking at the markets. We're up about 400 points. Again, after a monstrous day Monday, a big day Tuesday, a really nice last 90 minutes on Wednesday, and now today. It's been an incredible week to the upside for the markets. The Dow, the NASDAQ, the S&P, the whole thing.
Well, you're right. There's no doubt. And as far as fantastic futures, Pete.
Fantastic futures.
All right. Oil prices having a little bit of a rebound today because rate hike doubts, in other words, if we stay paused, as Pete just said, 85% chance through December, that's denting the dollar a little bit.
I'm going to give you volatility, which I gave you yesterday as well, John. The only reason I'm going back to it is we've not only in the last week or so gone from 23 down to 20, back up to 23, down to about 18, down to about 17. Well, John, now as I take a quick look, we're underneath 16 for the volatility index of the S&P 500. This has been an absolute free fall to the downside. And I think that's going to actually kick in a little bit more for the world that we live in, which is the options world, because they've gotten that much cheaper right now, which gives people a little bit more time, a little bit more leverage to be able to put on some of the trades that they want. And it's amazing to me to watch how the volatility index has been trading, how volatile volatility's been.
Yep. As Pete said, it's volume, volatility, and velocity. And we've come off that 23% reading that we hit last week, which was in the midst of that big 8 or 9% sell-off that we had. Now we've had those days that, as Pete accurately described, we've had pretty nice pops out of the market. And you got to give, since the volumes have been so light on these pops, Pete, you got to think that a lot of the trading is covering of shorts. So, all right, let's talk about ROKU. Our old buddy Jim Lebenthal used to love this one, Pete, and he was very good at it. And then he got out, and this thing just tumbled. It went from a couple $100 down into the, well, yesterday it was $60 a share. They came out with earnings. It spikes through 70, 75, and is pushing up at 30% jump, Pete, on fantastic revenue numbers. And for those of you who don't know, Roku isn't just those boxes, not just the box that you get with a separate Roku remote. It's built into a lot of the smart TVs. They basically license that as well.
Well, and you mentioned it, John. They had a monster beat. You look at revenues up 20%. That's incredible. They also talked about the ads and the video ads with a huge rebound that I think a lot of people were definitely surprised by. That's why the stock is having an absolutely incredible day. It's had a big bounce to the upside. There's also about 7 or 8% of those shares, John, that are short. I think a few squeezes are going on right now, and that's why we're seeing that stock just rocket to the upside. But it's also rocketing for all the right reasons as well. They had a great quarter, and they're getting what they deserve, which is a nice, big, fat move to the upside.
Yeah, 21 million shares already today, Pete, at mid-session versus 6 million normal. So that is, at least half those shares have to be shorts being bought back in, Pete. Even if they don't want to pull the trigger, their prime broker is pulling the trigger and saying, buy, buy, buy.
Yeah.
How about Crocs? This is still one of the funniest companies out there, Pete, because these might be the ugliest footwear on the planet. And yet I've owned some in the past, which of course goes to my taste in footwear. But Nike, they're still performing quite well. You've got On, which is On Holdings, ONON, that's done very well too. That's Roger Federer's big investment that he's made probably $1 billion on that one, Pete. It's a fabulous company. But Crocs just had to slash their outlook. For that reason, the stock is just getting hammered.
Yeah, the revenue decline's a huge issue. And then you start talking about that. Also, large short interest in this one as well, John, talking about somewhere close to about 10%. But the numbers weren't terrible until they cut that outlook. When they cut that outlook, we've said it many times, cut the outlook, those 3 words, not good for a stock. And that's what's sending this thing tumbling. I think this is one that we should keep an eye on, though, John, because of the fact that it's gotten so inexpensive. It still has fundamentally a lot of things that I think we'd find pretty attractive in a stock, except for the fact that they're declining, right? So if they can turn that at some point, I think that's when. And it doesn't mean you have to jump on it right away, today, tomorrow, the next day. I think you have to probably wait about a quarter or so to see if they're making that kind of a move. And if they are, if people are shifting back and those declines are all of a sudden turned into something a little bit better, I think that might be time to buy it. But right now, I wouldn't touch it.
Well, I'm in the same camp, Pete. As I said, not only are the shoes ugly, but you see fewer and fewer people walking around in them. For a while, they actually had like Louis Vuitton and a bunch of other people that were sort of putting their design onto the Crocs or with Crocs. And I haven't seen much of that anymore. But let's talk about Starbucks, Pete. Seems that Howard Schultz's company has sort of turned the corner. they were, of course, under a lot of pressure. And Pete and I talked yesterday about coffee, the beans themselves, coffee futures, and how they were down. But when your input, one of your largest costs is down, and you're able to still charge what you charged when it went up, you're doing pretty well. And that's what they're doing here. The earnings were really solid. Overall revenue, $9.4 billion to $1.06 a share versus 97 cents is what the street was looking for. This is an outperformer, Pete, and no wonder it's up double digits.
Yeah, and I think that the benefit for them is the resilient side of the U.S. because really when you look at it, John, they're still struggling a little bit in China for all the right reasons probably, but actually the China numbers wasn't quite as bad as people would maybe have expected. It was still up a little bit, maybe 4 or 5%, but you're right. And it was in the U.S. where they really absolutely captured far more people coming in and able to, as you and I've said a million times over, when the price of coffee goes up, people raise the price that they're going to charge at a McDonald's or a Starbucks or whatever. When it comes down, do they actually bring the price down? No. Yeah. So that's the world that we live in. And they've been able to do that for many, many years now at Starbucks. But I think Howard Schultz has done a great job having to step in once again and being a part of the company the way he has in a much more meaningful way. They are doing a great job, John. And when you look at what they're able to do in terms of the average customer coming in there, spending a little bit more. And with that, and transaction volumes going up, that's why you get a quarter like this where you've got a monster move to the upside. Stock recaptured $100 a share today.
Yeah, it's traded almost 10 million shares versus I think 5 million or so average, Pete. So this is another one of those where volume is there, and it's one of the drivers to some of the big NASDAQ moves that we're seeing here. This one is too. Palantir. This one, data analytics company, of course, they're really helped out by artificial intelligence, because if you're analyzing data, a lot of us would say, what a horrible job just to be sitting there, pounding away, trying to find patterns in data. But that's one of the things that if you give enough input to Palantir, their AI, along with their data analytics, can really find that needle in the haystack, that thing that you would otherwise miss trying to dig through that data. So these guys having one of their best days in a long time, Pete, 20+% rally. The stock is just powering higher right now.
And I was in this one. I missed this part of the run, John, and that's my own fault. I had a nice trade in there. I took it off and didn't realize that it was going to get this much of a boost to the upside. Now, I did that trade a while ago, just a week or so ago, but nonetheless, I missed out on this one, but they really did deliver. They delivered in many ways. And you talked about AI. They're talking about $1 billion run rate by 2025 for AI. That's what I think a lot of people caught a hold of that. And they went, now, wait a minute. Now, this company's really doing something big here. But across the board, they crushed it. It's really pretty impressive. The balance sheet's always looked great as well. It continues to look great. And, John, there are some shorts there. That's not hurting at all. As a matter of fact, that's helping that squeeze to the upside. So a really, really nice day for Palantir. A great year to date for Palantir, from $6 to north of $18. That's not such a bad run year to date, and that's impressive. That's what we're seeing out of Palantir.
3x.
Yeah,
that's a very nice move. All right. Now, Pete, I know that you and I are big fans of Pat McAfee. We're big fans of the Mannings, too. They are some of the funniest humans, those three people that we're talking about there. And we got a little clip from ESPN that Jared's got queued up here of Mr. Manning showing up on the screen. So let's take a look, Jared, and Pete and I can comment.
He looks like a mortician, doesn't he? He's playing the part.
Coffin corner is the corner of the end zone between the 10-yard line and the goal line. Make it happen.
Coffin corner.
Right there.
You're just too funny, man.
I want to punch a football. I always dreamed of getting carried off a football field like a hero. I never imagined being carried onto one.
If anyone can raise the coffin corner from the dead, it's Pat.
I
He
mean,
was
you
an
know, when
all-pro
you see
punter.
what he did, Pete,
Pat
and how
McAfee
often he was
is
able to
an
drill it
excellent
down into the
punter.
corner.
You're kicking the rugby punch. You aim for the 10-yard line.
And for 8
at
seasons,
that.
Pat
Look
played
at
with
him.
the swagger of a linebacker.
Look at the swag.
Finally, I provided a episode on punting. The viewers at ESPN Plus, do you think they'll watch?
Well, I do think it is a niche group that will love this episode.
Why did you become a punter? You could tackle. You had other options.
What a hit by Pat.
When I was born, I just had a rocket attached to my right hip. I used to play
A rocket.
soccer. Instead of running 7 miles to kick a ball, I decided to do it with 3 steps.
That, like I say, the Manning cast, Pete, funny as heck. Pat is so funny, and he's always in that signature black sleeveless shirt.
And I can't wait till every Friday when he's at wherever game day will be for Saturday. Pat and his crew show up, John, and they've had some of the greatest moments. I swear to you, that Notre Dame-Ohio State game, when they brought out fake Lou Holtz to talk to Lou Holtz and went back. I mean, Pat's really got it, and they allow him a lot of room because they are allowing him to do things they might not let other people do, probably. But I think that they realized they gave him a lot of money for one reason. That guy catches eyeballs, and he's fun. He's relatable. He has, you know, some sort of swagger. Hell, the guy looks like a linebacker, not a punter. I mean, physically.
Mm-hmm.
So he's got a lot of, like Peyton said, he's got that swag, man.
Oh, yeah. And deservedly so, Pat. You're doing a great job, and we're big fans. So we could make him an official rebel, maybe, Pete.
He's a rebel. He's a rebel. Although, John, you know, if we say rebel, his first thought is what I'm going to jump to in college football. We got 3 big-time games for sure this week, and we thought we'd sort of prep everybody up for it, John. So one of them is the Ole Miss Rebels, right? I mean, the running Rebels. These guys are unbelievable, and they're playing Texas A&M, who started off a little slow, but they're getting a little bit better, it seems like, each week. Should be a great game. That's the noon slated game that I think, you know, number 10 in the country. Let's remember, Ole Miss has 1 loss this year, John, and that's to Alabama. So I think that game is going to be a great one. Do you like that game at noon? I think that's the feature game at noon today.
Oh, yeah, it is. And the coaches talk about each other almost as much as they talk about their players, Pete.
Gotta love
So, yeah, that's going to be one that everybody's going to be tuned into. Notre Dame Clemson is kind of interesting too, Pete. Clemson's not as good as they have been, you know.
They
certainly
stink.
Yeah, but you know, for Notre Dame to be down in there, you know, what do they call it, Pete? Death Valley or whatever. Yep. A lot of surprises happen in Death Valley, and those guys come down and grab that rock or whatever it is, Pete, as they're streaming in. Every team, it seems these days, you know, if they don't have a board or something that they hit as they come out of the locker room, like Notre Dame does or like Va Tech does, they have some sort of rock or something.
They all got a shtick that they go through. All right, so that's the noon game, and I think, but I think the Texas A&M, because they are improving and they look a little bit better, and Ole Miss, and you know, you got to love the coach. I mean, he's one of the all-time greats. So when you look at that game, I think that's the feature game for me, only because Clemson does stink this year. It's not the Clemson of old where they're somewhere really competitive and you're scared of them and everything else. That's far from the Clemson team this year. So I think the second one is, how about Missouri? Now, nobody really talked much about Missouri. They're an SEC team. Everybody forgets that as well. But these guys, you know, they're number 12 in the country for a reason. They are pretty damn good. And they're going to be going down to Georgia, who in the latest poll, and I happen to agree with it, they're number 2. And I kind of think that's where they should be right now, because they've gotten better each week, but they started off so slow, John, that they just didn't seem like the Georgia team that's dominated for the last few years, although that's starting to accelerate. So I think that one between the hedges, that's the 3:30 game that I think we should all focus on. I think that should be a lot of fun. And I don't know. What do you think about that one? When I look at Missouri, they have their 1 loss. It's against LSU. And LSU is a really good team. I know they got 2 losses, but that's a really good football team.
Yep. And another one that I would just throw out there, Pete, just because I'm going to watch it, even though it's going to be a blowout, really, is Florida State and Pitt. It's going to be a blowout, but I want to see what kind of offense Florida State puts on the field this week, because, of course, they don't want to show all of their weapons, really, Pete. They'd rather show you a bunch of stuff that you have seen all year. You don't want them to really have a great scouting report on this game, because it should be a blowout. And for a blowout, you don't want to run all your best stuff. So I would say that one, like I said to you, I think Missouri going to Georgia, that's going to be a really tough spot for them, though. So it is lucky that Georgia's a little banged up.
Yeah, I think you're right, and maybe Mizzou's got a shot. Maybe we'll see. I mean, it could go a lot of different ways. Oklahoma State, great rivalry also, but yeah, I think that Mizzou game really does stand out. Florida State, the best receivers in all of football play on Florida State right now. Yep. If those 3 or 4 are absolutely amazing. Hell, that one kid who's 6'7" and whatever on the outside who can run like a damn deer. I'll tell you what, that's they're a scary team, and I think they can mismatch with just about anybody's defense. So Florida State's pretty fun. How about this one, John? And I already mentioned LSU. LSU's number 14. Nobody seems to talk about them, right? They're lost in the shuffle. They got a couple of losses. Well, they lost to some pretty damn good teams, but they're going to be playing Bama, number 8 Bama. I said it again, number 8 Bama. So Bama's got their one loss. That was against Texas. And then you look at LSU, and LSU, that Jaden Daniels, John, how about this? 25 touchdowns, 3 interceptions. He's got 73% completion rate. I'd say that guy's having a pretty good year. Oh, and by the way, he's averaging almost 7 yards a carry. He's run for over 500 yards. That quarterback was catching flack early on because he's a little bit more frail. He's a West Coast kid. He's there playing at LSU. You know, that is country. And he is lighting it up. And I think people are getting to embracing the fact that this kid's one heck of a quarterback. So that game could be pretty fun down there. And, you know, in Alabama and Tuscaloosa, that should be pretty fun. What do you think of that one?
That will be a good game. And Pete, it's going to be, you know, it's incumbent on Oklahoma. I'll just throw this one out to you. After losing at Kansas and making a nice comeback, but then not being able to finish, and Kansas being as good as they are, especially at home. This is something that, you know, Oklahoma at 7-1, they can't have any more slip-ups. No. We all know that there's going to be teams that go undefeated, but there's going to be a couple of those teams that only have one loss that get into the playoffs. And so you're going to have to just, you know, put the hammer down if you're Oklahoma, because that was one they really couldn't afford, even though it was against a good team, Pete.
Right. Yeah. Well, I was going to go with Texas and the World Series and everything, but John, you know what? That was kind of a blowout World Series, 4-1. Texas was great. Arizona struggled a lot, you know, to get some runs and blah, blah, blah. And it turns out that, you know, it's already over. But that being said, how about Jim Harbaugh? Now, this poor guy, I shouldn't say it like that, but Jim has put himself in the position where he is in some pretty hot water right now. But the one thing that I really took away, because everybody's got a comment, right? It's the NCAA. They'll stumble around with this thing forever. The Big Ten hasn't done anything actively to go after him yet. And everybody's getting pretty, you know, antsy and angry, and the sign stealing, all of that, right? I'll tell you what, your guy, Coach Prime, said exactly what I was saying on the radio the last couple of weeks, John, on CCO, just talking about, well, you know, sign stealing. How important really is it in football? And here was the quote from Dion. I should have sent that to Jared ahead of time, but he said, sign stealing in football doesn't give you nearly the advantage that it gives you in baseball. You still got to stop them. Even when the whole game plan's in front of you, you still have to stop them. So essentially, he's giving a little bit of a lifeline to Harbaugh, basically saying, look, even if you're doing the stealing, first of all, you're probably pretty stupid for doing it, but it's not really that much of help, if any help at all. And I'm in agreement there with Dion for sure, because if you and I are playing and you're stealing signs, and at the very last minute you're signaling your team, you're telling me that your guys are smart enough to be able to adjust in milliseconds to something that's playing right in front of them, and they're going to maybe be able to stop it. Oh, by the way, what if they miss the signs? They don't get them the right way, or they get fooled by the signs. I'm with Dion on this one. I like the way he approached it, saying, hey, this ain't baseball. It's one thing to know a fastball's coming. It's another to know that you're going to be passing down the field. You don't know exactly where. I mean, it's kind of ridiculous. So what do you think, John? And is Jim Harbaugh going to be in the NFL pretty soon?
If it builds, Pete, yes, he is going to be in the NFL, and he'll be $100 million coach. On the other hand, as Dion said and you said, the quarterback still has to make the play, make the decision, read the defense. So if you know that the quarterback is going to throw the ball, and like you said, Florida State, you got 4 receivers. Okay, who's he going to hit? The D-backs are going to play differently because they know that he's going to throw the ball. The defensive backs, unless it's a short yardage situation, are usually there for the pass, and they'll come up and run support, of course. And if they know in quotes that it's going to be a pass, they still have to cover the tight end. They still have to cover, the 2 wide outs and the slot back and all that stuff. I mean, come on. It's not like does it give you an edge? I can't really say that that's a tremendous edge. I don't know that he's done it. Neither of us do. We know that some of his, I guess, coaches or whatever they are, Pete, the interns or whatever have been at some of these other games, and were they there to steal signs and all that kind of stuff? We'll see. There's, going to be a lot of footage that the NCAA will go through, and if they accuse him, he'll be gone, and he'll be coaching some pro team, probably Arizona.
How about Vegas is open? What if he jumps right now? No, I'm just kidding. Yeah, no, I agree with you, John. And here's the other thing that people just don't understand, that don't play football, didn't play football. There are plays during practice where you know the play and you still can't stop them. You know the play. You might know the play. And I'm talking about practice when you're doing 7-on-7 or you're doing 11-on-11 and you're going through it and the coach is yelling out, do it again. Why are they yelling, do it again? Because they didn't function properly the first time, even though they knew the play. So I keep going back to the advantage really is so small that I don't hardly view it as an advantage at all. But I know everybody else wants to, go all over the place. And Jim already had his issue early in the year that they suspended him for. So I think he's got a target, and he's maybe put it on his own back, but he's got a target on himself right now.
How many close games has Michigan had this year, Pete?
0.
Exactly right. Exactly right. And their second biggest rival, obviously Ohio State's the biggest, but the second biggest rival, Michigan State, was that one close? Did he need to steal signs to win that one?
It was a track meet.
Yeah. So if it's illegal or if it's against the rules, I guess, for a coach or a program to steal signs, okay. Then if they catch him doing it, then they got to discipline him. On the other hand, is it really hard and fast about that stealing signs? What it is, of course, scouting the other team that they exchange films, or these days tape, videotape, digital, not even tape. What am I saying? But they exchange that. Would there be a slight edge to you showing up at a game, not at a practice, showing up at a game that you're not going to be getting that tape from? Well, it does give them a little bit of an edge, perhaps. We'll have to see. All right. Pete and I will be back Monday next week at 1 p.m. Eastern Time. We hope you guys have a fabulous weekend, and we'll see you then.